The coin was the last one in my pocket, a single worn copper piece, all that remained from selling my last healing tinctures. I clutched it so tight the rough edges bit into my palm as I pushed through the jeering crowd in the dusty square. I shouldn't have stopped. I knew better. Strangers in our border town meant trouble, and auctions like this only ever sold stolen goods or stolen lives. But something pulled me. And then I saw him. Kneeling in the center of that cruel circle, a man with a coarse burlap sack tied brutally over his head. His hands were bound behind his back, ropes cutting into his wrists. He didn't tremble, he didn't beg, he simply knelt, a statue of silent endurance, while the merchant, a greasy man with a sneer, kicked him in the ribs. "This one's more dead than alive," the merchant laughed, his voice grating like stones. "Fever's taken him. Poison, likely. Won't last the night, but for 1 coin, he's yours. A bargain for a strong back if he ever stands again." The crowd chuckled. A man without a face, a man without a name, worth less than the dirt he knelt on. My eyes weren't on the merchant. They were on the prisoner, on the slight, almost invisible tremor that ran through his shoulders, on the way his bound hands clenched just once, a flash of defiant strength before going still. Fever, yes. Poison, almost certainly, but not dead, not yet. My mother's voice whispered in my ear, the last lesson she ever gave me before the coughing sickness took her. "Alara, a healer does not look away from suffering, even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous. Our purpose is to mend what is broken." I wasn't just a healer's daughter anymore. I was the healer. And this broken man, this ghost in the square, was screaming a silent plea only I could hear. Before my mind could protest, before fear could ice my veins, my arm moved. The coin, my last coin, flew from my fingers. It hit the stone paving with a ping that sliced through the laughter, sharp and final. "I'll buy him." The words were out, quieter than I intended, but they carried. The crowd fell silent. The merchant's sneer faltered, replaced by amused disbelief. "Little healer," he taunted, using the title the town knew me by. "This is no sick puppy. This is a man, a dying one. Your coin buys you a corpse by morning. No returns." My heart hammered against my ribs. 1 coin was the price you named. A price has been paid. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Foolish girl, soft heart, she'll regret it. Their thoughts were almost audible. The merchant spat on the ground, a gesture of contempt. "Your problem, then." He gestured to a guard who stepped forward and sliced the ropes binding the prisoner's hands. The moment the bonds were cut, the man's strength left him. He collapsed sideways, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. I didn't think. I just moved. I knelt beside him in the dirt, ignoring the stares. His skin, where my fingers brushed his arm, was burning, a dry, fierce heat that spoke of a fire raging within. The scent hit me next. Bitter, metallic, wrong. Aconite, a poison that didn't kill fast, but slow. It dismantled you from the inside, stealing strength, clouding the mind. It was a coward's weapon. Anger, hot and clean, washed over my fear. "Get up," I whispered in the dirt, hooking my hands under his arms. "We have to go, now." He was a dead weight, tall, heavy with muscle even in his weakened state. A low groan escaped the sack as I tried to haul him up. With a shuddering effort, he planted his feet. He leaned on me, nearly sending us both sprawling, but he held. Together we stumbled out of the square, leaving the laughter behind, a spectacle of pity and foolish hope. The walk to my cottage on the forest's edge was an eternity. Every step was a battle. He fought to stay conscious, to move his legs. I fought to bear his weight, to keep us both upright. The forest path, usually a place of peace, felt menacing. Every rustle was a pursuer. Every shadow held a threat. "Who are you?" I breathed the question to the air, to the sack-covered head, lolling on my shoulder. There was no answer but ragged breath. Just as the thatched roof of my cottage came into view, his legs finally gave out. He slid from my grasp, unconscious. With the last of my strength, I dragged him the final yards, through the herb garden, over the threshold, and onto the rough wooden floor of my home. I bolted the door, my back against it, gasping for air, sweat and dust coating my skin. What had I done? I lit the hearth, fetched water, and forced my hands to stop shaking. Healer's hands. They had work to do. I knelt beside him and with careful precision used my shears to cut away the filthy sack. The fabric, soaked with sweat and something darker, peeled away, and my breath caught. This was no ordinary face. Even pale with fever, marked with grime and a darkening bruise on his jaw, it was a face carved from authority. Strong, clean lines, a mouth set in a firm line even in unconsciousness. Thick, dark hair, matted and tangled, with a few strands caught in what looked like the remnants of formal braids. This was a face that commanded, a face that belonged in halls of stone, not my dusty floor. And the scent of aconite was stronger now, mixed with something else, something wild, like frost and pine and deep earth, the scent of a wolf. Not just any wolf, an alpha. My blood ran cold. I had bought an alpha, a poisoned, hunted alpha. He stirred then, a shudder racking his frame. His eyes flew open beneath fever-closed lids, not the blue or brown I expected. For a terrifying, magnificent second, they burned a luminous molten gold. Then he spoke, his voice a raw scrape of sound, a name torn from the depths of his agony. "Lyra, forgive me. I'm coming, I swear." And he was gone again, lost to the fever. Lyra, a sister? A daughter? A weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, heavier than his body had been. I had no coin, but I had my herbs. I had my mother's knowledge, and I had a king or something like it dying on my floor. The ghost I bought for a coin had a name now. It was Lyra, and he was coming for her, and somehow, against all reason, I was now part of that promise. The fever took him completely as night deepened. I worked in the frantic, focused rhythm my mother had drilled into me. Steady hands, calm mind. Aconite required a delicate counter. Too much antidote too fast would shock his system and kill him. Too little, and the poison would win. I prepared a tincture of valerian root for calm, dandelion to cleanse the blood, and slender willow bark for the fever. I propped his head up, his skin burning against my forearm, and tipped the liquid between his lips. He choked, coughed, but swallowed, a reflex of a body desperately clinging to life. I dragged him closer to the hearth's warmth, covered him with my one good blanket, and began my vigil. The delirium started near midnight. He twisted on the floor, muscles bunching and knotting. Whispers became ragged words, fragments of a life I couldn't imagine. The letter, a trap. I knew it was a trap. Roran, hold the line, hold the borders. Silver, too much silver. Lyra, my little star, where did they take you? His voice broke on the name Lyra every time. It was a wound. I found myself whispering back, my hands on his burning forehead. Shh, rest. You have to fight the poison first. But his wolf inside him was also fighting. Around the 3rd hour before dawn, the true battle began. It wasn't just feverish thrashing anymore. His body began to change. Bones popped and groaned beneath his skin, muscles rippling in unnatural waves. His hands curled, fingers elongating into claws that scratched against the wooden floor. A low, pained growl vibrated in his chest, a sound that didn't belong to a man. He was trying to shift. His wolf, his true nature, was trying to break free to heal him. But the aconite was a cage. It blocked the transformation, trapping his body in a torturous halfway state. I'd seen shifts before in my old village. My father, before he vanished, could shift with beautiful, fluid grace. This was not that. It was his body tearing itself apart, unable to become whole. His eyes flew open again, pure, terrified, furious gold. They locked on mine, but I didn't know if he saw me. "No," I commanded, my healer's voice ringing out over the sounds of cracking bones. "You can't. The poison has you locked. You have to stop. Let it go." I scrambled for the gentian root, the stabilizer. I mixed it fast, my hands miraculously steady. I knelt before the writhing, half-formed creature, danger radiating from him in waves. "Look at me. Breathe with me." I took an exaggerated, slow breath, holding his wild gaze. "Your wolf can't save you tonight. I can, but you have to let me." For a second, the gold eyes flickered, focusing. There was a mind in there, a will, holding onto my voice like a lifeline in a storm. I lifted his head again. "Drink. This will help the pain. Let the wolf sleep." He obeyed. His head was heavy in my hands, but he drank, the muscles in his throat working. The violent contortions began to subside, the bones sliding back with sickening crunches. The gold faded from his eyes, leaving them a pale, exhausted blue before they fluttered shut. He fell into a true, deep unconsciousness, the fever finally breaking like a wave upon a shore. I slumped back against the wall, trembling from head to toe. I had just faced down a shifting alpha in pain, and I had won. Dawn was bleeding light through my window when he woke. I was dozing in the chair, a blanket around my shoulders. I felt the change in the room, the shift from the stillness of sickbed watch to the alertness of a predator. I opened my eyes. He was sitting up, the blanket pulled around his waist. He was staring at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. Then his gaze lifted and found me. Those eyes, pale, weary blue, like a winter sky after a storm, but sharp, incredibly sharp. They took me in, the cottage, the herbs drying, the empty vial in my hand, in one sweeping, assessing glance. "You saw," he said. His voice was rough, but the authority in it was unmistakable. It wasn't a question. "I saw you fight a transformation the poison wouldn't allow," I replied, standing. My legs were stiff. "It would have killed you." He gave a slow, careful nod, as if moving hurt. It nearly did. His eyes never left my face. "You stopped it. How?" "Gentian roots and a firm voice, my mother's recipes." I brought him a cup of water. He took it, his fingers brushing mine. A spark, subtle but electric, jolted up my arm. His eyes widened a fraction. He felt it too. He drank deeply, then set the cup down. "The poison. Aconite. Yes, administered through inhalation by the smell of the sack. You were meant to be weak, disoriented, and unable to shift." A shadow passed over his face. They knew what I was. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of risk. "You know what I am." "You're an alpha," I said simply, "and you're looking for someone named Lyra." A flash of raw pain, so potent it was like a physical blow in the small room. "My sister," he confirmed, the words tight. "She was taken. I received a letter promising answers if I came alone. It was an ambush." "And now she's alone, and you're here," I finished softly. The pieces were forming a terrible picture. An alpha lured from his territory, a sister stolen. This was no random kidnapping. This was a blade aimed at the heart of a pack. He tried to push himself up, gritting his teeth against the obvious pain. "I have to go, now." "You'll take 3 steps and collapse," I said, crossing my arms. "The aconite is purged, but your body is ravaged. You need at least 2 days of proper rest and nourishment." "I don't have 2 days." The roar was sudden, alpha power rippling through the room, making the pots on my shelf rattle. He instantly looked regretful, running a hand over his face. "Forgive me. I have no right to shout at you. You saved my life. But every moment I'm here, Lyra is in danger." I understood his fear. It mirrored my own, the one I'd carried for years. Then let's use the time wisely, I said, my mind clicking into a plan. You can't travel yet, but we can plan. I know this region. I've heard whispers of disappearances, of caravans that move in the dead of night, of an organization that trades in silver and souls. His intense focus was back, locked on me. What do you know? I know it's not new. My father, my voice hitched. He was investigating disappearances in our village years ago. He believed it was a network. He was getting close, and then he vanished too. The silence that followed was thick. You've been searching for him, the Alpha stated. For 11 years. The old ache was a constant companion. The trails always went cold. The village elders were threatened. We were told to stop looking. So I left. I came here, to the edge of nowhere, to listen, and I've heard things. Names, places, a silver merchant who funds the raids, a border alpha who provides safe passage. His intense focus was back, locked on me. Names, give me names. I took a deep breath. This was the point of no return. Sharing this knowledge got my father killed. A merchant named Kalen Vex, and an alpha, my alpha, a treacherous part of my mind whispered, went utterly still. Ronan Thorn, he repeated, the name a curse. He borders the Northern Territory. It makes a sick kind of sense. He looked from the fire to his healing wounds, to me. You have given me more than my life back. You have given me a direction. He struggled, then asked the question he'd been avoiding. What is your name, healer? Ilara, I said. He nodded. Ilara. He said my name like it was a vow. I am in your debt, but I must ask for more. When I can walk, will you show me where to start? You know this land. You have the ears they ignore. The request hung in the air. To step back into the world of shadows that took my father, to guide a wounded king through a den of wolves and thieves, it was madness. But I looked at him, at the determined set of his jaw, at the ghost of fear for his sister in his eyes. I saw my father's face. I heard the old unanswered cry for justice in my own heart. I'll guide you, I heard myself say, but not for your debt, for Lyra, and for my father. A profound relief softened the harsh lines of his face. Then we have a pact. He held out his hand, not as an alpha, but as a partner. I took it. His hand was large, warm, and still too weak, but the grip was firm. The spark returned, stronger this time, a current of something unspoken passing between us. In that touch, the ghost from the auction became a man, a king with a missing crown, a brother with a stolen sister, and my simple, safe life in the cottage by the woods was over. The 2 days passed in a strange, suspended tension. He slept, ate the broths I made, and slowly tested his strength, moving from the floor to the chair, then taking shaky laps around my small cottage. I learned to read his moods. The distant stare meant he was thinking of Lyra. The clenched jaw was him battling frustration at his own weakness. The rare, fleeting softening of his eyes when I handed him a new bandage or a new tonic, that was gratitude, and something else I didn't dare to name. He never told me his name. I called him nothing. He was just him, the weight in my cottage, the storm in my calm. On the morning of the 3rd day, he stood by the door as the first light filtered in. He was dressed in the clean, simple clothes I'd managed to piece together from my father's old trunk. They were too short in the sleeves and tight across the shoulders, but they covered the worst of his healing wounds. He looked less like a dying prisoner and more like what he was, a warrior, condensed and ready to ignite. "Today," he said. It wasn't a question. "Today," I agreed, slinging my healer's pack over my shoulder. It was heavy with herbs, poultices, and the few sharp tools I owned. We start at Graymore. It's a train post. People talk there. I have a contact. He nodded. Lead the way. The forest path felt different with him behind me. I was hyper-aware of his presence, the sound of his footsteps, the shift of air as he moved. He was still recovering, but his stride was already long and sure, his senses alert, constantly scanning our surroundings. For the first time since my father left, I didn't feel entirely alone in the woods. "You move quietly," he observed after a while, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "I've had to," I replied, not looking back. "A woman living alone learns to be a ghost." "You're no ghost, Ilara." The way he said my name still sent a peculiar thrill through me. "You're the most solid thing I've encountered in weeks." I had no answer for that. Graymore was as I remembered, a muddy crossroads of a town, all rough timber and wary eyes. I led him to a tanner's shop at the far end, the air thick with the smell of hides and tannin. Old Gregor looked up from his scraping, his milky eyes narrowing at me, then widening at the man behind me. "Ilara, been a while." His voice was a dry rasp. "And you've brought company." "I need information, Gregor." His gaze slid over my companion again, lingering on the proud set of his shoulders, the latent power in his stillness. "Dangerous business information. Costs more than last time." I placed 2 vials on his counter. "Heart seed tincture for your wife's palpitations, stronger blend." Gregor picked them up, held them to the light. He grunted, appeased. "What's the query?" "Children. Wolves, disappearing, an organized trade." All pretense of ease left Gregor's face. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a thread. "Are you stirring that pot again, girl, after what happened to your da?" "Just point me to the pot, Gregor. Who's stirring it?" He glanced nervously at the door. "There's a partnership. Human greed, wolf betrayal. They take the young, the strong. Some are sold south as laborers. Silver collars break the will, they say. Others, the high-value ones, they're kept. Leverage." My alpha took a single step forward. The small shop seemed to shrink. "Names." Gregor flinched. "Kalen Vex. Silver runs through his fingers like water. He finances the raids." He swallowed. "And Ronan Thorn. He controls the border passes, lets the caravans through for a cut." "Where?" The word was a blade. "Main depot's north, near Blackwater, an old logging stable, a red door with a horseshoe." Gregor was sweating now. "But be fools. They're guarded. They have wolfsbane laced arrows, silver nets. They're ready for rescue attempts." "Thank you, Gregor," I said, retrieving my now empty pouch. "Ilara," the old man whispered as we turned to leave. "He's marked, your friend. I can smell it on him. The kind of mark that brings storms. You be careful which storm you follow." We left the stifling shop for the cold gray air. The alpha's face was a mask of cold fury. "Ronan Thorn," he breathed, steam puffing from his lips. "I trusted him at border councils. This is treason wrapped in profit." "We need supplies," I said, pulling my cloak tighter. "And a plan. Blackwater is 2 days' hard ride. We're on foot." "We find horses," he stated. "With what? I have no coin left. My medicines are my currency." He looked at me, a strange expression crossing his face. He reached into the collar of the too-tight tunic I hadn't noticed before. From under the fabric, he drew out a ring. It was simple, heavy silver, etched with the image of a howling wolf curled around a mountain peak. It was not ornate, but it pulsed with significance. "This will buy horses," he said, his voice thick, "and more." I stared at the ring. It was a seal, a symbol of office, the final, undeniable proof of who and what he was. This was no minor alpha. The crest, I'd seen it sketched in old books, the mountain wolf of the Northern Vale, the royal crest. He was not just an alpha. He was the alpha, the king. The world tilted. I had nursed a king. I had scolded a king. I had made broth for a king. The man I'd bought for a copper coin was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. He saw the understanding dawn in my eyes, followed by the shock. He closed his fist around the ring, hiding it. "Now you know," he said, his voice low, "and now you understand why I could not say, why every word between us had to be measured. My name in the wrong ears is a death sentence, for me, for Lyra, and now for you." "Your name," I whispered. He held my gaze, the winter blue eyes filled with a storm of apology and resolve. "Kaelin," he said. "My name is Kaelin." He shared the name of the silver merchant, his enemy, a disguise or a bitter joke, or perhaps his true name, a secret he now entrusted to me. Kaelin. It suited him, strong, unyielding, a name fit for a king who knelt in the dirt with a sack over his head. "We should go," was all I could manage. My mind was reeling. A king, a missing princess, a traitorous alpha. My quiet life was not just over, it had been obliterated, replaced by a legend walking beside me. We found a surly stablemaster at the edge of town. Kaelin did the talking, his demeanor shifting subtly into that of a commanding, albeit travel-worn, noble. He showed the man the ring, not the crest, but the heavy silver itself. No questions were asked. Within the hour, we had 2 sturdy horses and a pack with basic supplies. As we mounted up, Kaelin looked at me. "The debt grows, Ilara. A life, a direction, now a horse." "The debt is to Lyra," I repeated firmly, gathering the reins. "Let's go bring her home." We rode north, leaving Graymore behind. The ring was hidden again, but its weight hung between us. He was Kaelin, the wounded wolf. He was also the Alpha King, a sovereign in exile, and I, Ilara, the healer, was now riding into a conspiracy that reached to the highest branches of power, beside a man whose very existence was a secret I had to keep. The path to Blackwater stretched before us, cold and uncertain. But for the first time in 11 years, the path my father walked was no longer cold. It was blazing with danger, with purpose, and with the fierce, silent figure of a king riding at my side. The road to Blackwater was a gauntlet of mud, biting wind, and our own silent thoughts. Kaelin, I had to think of him by the name he gave, rode with a focused intensity, his body still not at full strength, but fueled by a purpose that burned like a cold fire. I watched him from the corner of my eye, seeing the king in the set of his jaw, the prisoner in the shadows under his eyes. We spoke little, but the silence was no longer awkward. It was the silence of hunters, of 2 people conserving energy for what lay ahead. He would point out game trails or distant smoke with a nod. I would name a useful herb growing by the path. It was a quiet, practical language. On the second evening, with Blackwater a dark smudge on the horizon, we stopped at a ramshackle inn called the Weary Traveler. It was the kind of place where people asked no questions and remembered no faces, perfect for us. The common room was hazy with smoke from a poorly vented hearth. A few rough-looking men played dice in a corner. A barmaid with tired eyes took our coin for a single room and 2 bowls of stew without a word. The room was exactly as expected. 1 narrow bed, a rickety chair, a cracked wash basin. The air smelled of mildew and old straw. "I'll take the floor," Kaelin said immediately, his voice echoing in the tiny space. "You're still healing. You need proper rest more than I do. I will not take your bed, Ilara." We stood facing each other in the dim light, a ridiculous standoff over a lumpy mattress. The proximity was suddenly overwhelming. I could smell the scent of the road on him, horse, leather, cold air, and that underlying wild frost pine scent that was uniquely his. "We share it," I said finally, the words leaving my mouth before my sense could catch them. "It's wide enough. We're both adults. We can manage a night without impropriety." The last word felt foolish, but I held his gaze. He studied my face for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. "Very well." The tension didn't leave. It simply changed form. becoming a tight wire strung between us as we ate our bland stew in silence. After, I busied myself checking my herb pouches. He sat in the chair, sharpening his borrowed belt knife with a smooth, rhythmic motion. "Your father," he said, not looking up from the blade. What was he like? The question, in the quiet room, felt like a key turning in a lock. "He was strong," I said, my fingers tracing the dried leaves of a mending moss. "Quiet, like you, but he had a laugh that could shake the rafters. He loved my mother deeply. When she died, part of him went with her. The investigating, the searching for the truth behind the kidnappings, it was the only thing that kept the other part of him alive. And then they took him too. Yes, because he was getting too close. Because he was a threat. Just like you are now." He met my eyes, the firelight catching the blue. "And you've carried that threat alone for 11 years. No pack? No mate?" The question was casual, but it felt weighted. "No. The village, after the threats, it wasn't safe for me to stay. I was a reminder of the trouble. I left. Being a healer lets you be close to people, but apart. It's safer that way. Safer," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "But not living." "What is living for a king?" I countered softly. A shadow crossed his face. "Duty. Responsibility, a crown that feels heavier than stone, a sister who was your only light." He looked into the small fire in the grate. "Living is something I haven't truly done since my parents died, until I woke up on a healer's floor and saw a pair of green eyes telling me I wouldn't die today." My breath hitched. The air between us crackled, not with the earlier tension, but with something deeper, more terrifying. A recognition, the same spark I'd felt when our hands touched. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping. "We should sleep. Dawn comes early." We prepared for bed with a stiff, formal politeness, turning our backs to each other. I blew out the candle and slid under the rough blanket on my side, pressed against the cold wall. He lay on his side, a solid, warm presence a hand's breadth away. The bed was small. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I could hear his steady breathing. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then, in the absolute dark, his voice came, low and rough. "Alara, there is something my wolf recognized in you from the first moment I was clear enough to sense it." I froze. "Recognized?" "The bond," he whispered, the word a sacred, terrifying thing in the dark. "The moon bond. You are my destined mate." The world stopped. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it. Mate. The word meant nothing and everything. I was human. I'd heard of the bond, a legendary, unbreakable connection between wolf souls. It was folklore. It wasn't for people like me. "That's impossible," I breathed. "I thought so, too. I fought it. To drag you into my war, into this danger, it would be the deepest kind of selfishness. But ignoring it is a lie, and I will not lie to you, not anymore." Tears, hot and sudden, pricked my eyes. Not from fear, but from the sheer, staggering honesty of it, from the loneliness his words echoed and soothed all at once. "What does it mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It means my soul knows yours. It means my wolf sees his other half. It means, if you accept it, we would be bound, partners, in all things." He shifted, and I felt his hand find mine in the darkness. His fingers laced through mine, solid and sure. The spark was a constant hum now, a connection thrumming to life. "But the choice is yours, Alara, always yours. I will bind no one to my fate against their will. The choice, to tie my life to a king's tragedy, to a war in the shadows, or to walk away from the first person who had made me feel seen and safe and fiercely alive since my parents died." I didn't have the answer. Not yet. But I didn't let go of his hand. "We have to find Lyra first," I whispered into the dark. "We will. Together." And with that promise hanging between us, a new and fragile thing in the broken world, we finally slept. Not as a healer and a patient, not as a commoner and a king, but as two souls, wounded and weary, finding an unexpected anchor on the edge of a storm. The stable with the red horseshoe was exactly where Gregor said it would be, but seeing it sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the northern cold. It sat in a hollow, surrounded by skeletal trees, looking abandoned, but the air was wrong. Too quiet, no birdsong, and the tracks in the mud leading to its large doors were fresh and many. We left the horses tied deep in the woods, a mile back. Now we crouched in a thicket of brambles on a ridge overlooking the hollow. Kalen lay beside me, his body perfectly still, his eyes scanning the scene below. The king was gone, replaced entirely by the hunter. 2 guards patrolled outside, bulky men with crossbows slung over their shoulders. They moved with a bored rhythm, but their eyes constantly swept the tree line. "There will be more inside," Kalen murmured, his voice barely a breath. "At least 4, maybe prisoners in the stalls. Lyra," his voice tightened. "If she's here, they'll keep her separate, hidden." "How do we do this?" I asked, my own voice small. "We wait for night, for a shift change. Then we go in fast and quiet. Your job is to find the prisoners, get them out. My job is to clear the path." The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. I nodded, my mouth dry.
The hours crawled by. The sky turned the color of a bruise, then deepened to black. A half-moon rose, casting sharp, deceptive shadows. Just as the cold was seeping into my bones, the main door creaked open. Light and the sound of raucous laughter spilled out. 3 new guards emerged, joking with the 2 on duty as they swapped places. The original 2 stumbled inside, the door closing behind them with a thud that echoed in the hollow. "Now," Kalen breathed. We moved like ghosts down the slope, using the noise of the wind and the pines to cover our sounds. The 2 new guards were lax, lighting pipes, turning their backs to the woods as they complained about the cold. Kalen was a blur. One moment he was beside me, the next he was behind the first guard. A hand clamped over the man's mouth, a sharp twist, and he crumpled silently. The second guard turned at the soft thud, his eyes wide. He fumbled for his crossbow. I acted on pure instinct. I flung a small leather pouch I'd prepared earlier. It struck his face, bursting in a cloud of fine, iridescent powder, ground sleep rose and feverfew. He inhaled a surprised gasp, coughed once, and his eyes rolled back as he collapsed into a deep, instant slumber. Kalen looked at me, then at the sleeping man, a flicker of surprised respect in his eyes. He gave me a curt nod. We dragged the bodies into the shadows. Kalen took the key from the first guard's belt. He put his ear to the thick wooden door, listening. He held up 4 fingers, 4 voices inside. He looked at me, his eyes asking the final question. "Ready?" I gripped my dagger, the one I'd never used on a person before tonight. I nodded. He turned the key. The lock clicked, soft as a heartbeat. He shoved the door open and surged inside. Chaos erupted. I followed on his heels. The inside was a cavernous space, lit by hanging lanterns. Hay and filth covered the floor. 4 men were around a makeshift table playing cards. They looked up, shock freezing them for a fatal second. Kalen didn't give them the chance to recover. He was a storm of controlled violence. He broke the first man's wrist as he reached for a sword, drove his elbow into the second's throat. The third managed to draw a blade and lunged. Steel flashed, biting into Kalen's arm. He didn't make a sound. He grabbed the man's wrist, snapped it, and drove the man's own knife into his chest. The 4th man, bigger and faster, had a wolfsbane-coated dagger. He circled Kalen, eyes gleaming. "Thought you were dead, princeling," he sneered. The insult seemed to fuel Kalen. He moved faster than I could follow. A kick to the knee, a disarming twist, and the man was on the ground, Kalen's foot on his throat. "Where is she?" Kalen's voice was deathly quiet. "Stall at the back, silver cage," the man gurgled. Kaylin applied pressure. The man went limp, unconscious. The fight had taken seconds. I stood panting, the smell of blood and hay thick in my nose. Kaylin was already moving, ignoring the blood dripping from his arm, towards the row of stable stalls at the rear. The first few held supplies. The next, my stomach lurched. Children, 5 of them, huddled together in the straw, chained by their ankles. They stared at us with huge, terrified eyes. "We're here to help," I said, my voice shaking but clear. I moved to them, pulling my lock-picking tools from my pack. My father had taught me that too. "Where is the girl, the one they brought recently, with blonde hair?" A small boy with a dirty face pointed a trembling finger to the very last stall, a solid door with a heavy bar across it. Not wood, metal. Kaylin was already there. He gripped the bar, muscles corded in his neck. With a groan of protesting metal, he bent it and wrenched it free. He threw the door open. Inside was not a stall, but a cell. Bars of silver-lined iron formed a cage in the center, and inside the cage, curled in on herself, was a girl. She was maybe 12, her fine blonde hair a tangled mess, her dress torn and dirty. But when the door opened, she lifted her head. Her face was pale and smudged, but her eyes, the same pale winter blue as Kaylin's, were fierce and unbroken. Those eyes locked onto Kaylin. For a moment, there was no sound. Then a small, broken whisper. "Kale?" The king, the warrior, the unstoppable force, shattered. He fell to his knees before the cage, his hands wrapping around the silver bars, heedless of the burn. "Lyra, my little star, I'm here. I knew you'd come," she whispered. A single tear cut a clean path through the grime on her cheek. "I told them, my brother is the king. He always comes." The love in that simple statement was a physical force in the room. I hurried forward, my eyes stinging. The lock on the cage was complex, but it was just a lock. My picks found the tumblers. After a tense moment, there was a satisfying click. Kaylin threw the door open and gathered his sister into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. She buried her face in his neck, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "We have to go," I urged softly, looking back at the main door. "The others." Kaylin nodded, standing with Lyra in his arms. She was light as a bird. He carried her out of the cage as I moved to the children, quickly picking their ankle locks. "Stay close," I told them. "Be very quiet." We formed a ragged line, Kaylin leading with Lyra in his arms, me herding the 5 children behind him. We moved towards the main door, hope a fragile flame in my chest. It was then that the side door, one I hadn't even noticed, swung open. A man stood there, tall and elegant in expensive clothes that looked absurd in the filthy stable. Kaylin Vex, and beside him, a mountain of a man with a cruel and familiar face. Ronan Torn. In Ronan's hand was a crossbow, loaded and pointed directly at Kaylin's heart, and in Kaylin Vex's hand was a pistol, its barrel aimed at the child clinging to my leg. "Well, well," Vex said, his voice smooth as oiled silk. "The Ghost King returns, and he brought a little mouse healer with him. How touching." We were trapped. The children whimpered. Lyra's arms tightened around her brother's neck. Kaylin stood like a stone, his back to the threat, his eyes fixed on Ronan Torn, with a hatred so pure it scorched the air. The fragile flame of hope guttered and died. The rescue was over. We had found the princess, only to deliver ourselves to the wolves. The silence in the stable was thicker than the blood on the floor. The only sounds were the ragged breathing of the children and the low, menacing click as Kaylin Vex cocked his pistol. "Drop the child, King," Vex purred, his gaze flicking to me and the little boy beside me, "or my associate here puts a wolfsbane bolt through your spine. It won't kill you, not right away. It'll just paralyze you, let you watch what comes next." Ronan Torn's finger rested lightly on the crossbow's trigger. His smile was a predator's grin. "Shoulda stayed dead, Kaelin. Woulda been cleaner." Kaelin, my Kaelin, didn't move. He held Lyra, his back to the threat, his whole being focused on his sister, his eyes fixed on Ronan Torn with a hatred so pure it scorched the air. "Let the healer and the children go, Vex, Torn. This is between you and me." Vex laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're in no position to make demands. You have nothing. No army, no crown, just a bleeding arm and a sentimental heart." His eyes slid at me, curious and cold. "Though this one is a surprise, the famous healer's daughter. We wondered where you'd scuttled off to. Your father died very quietly, you know. Never made a peep."
The words were a physical blow. I swayed, the horror of a confirmed truth worse than the years of doubt. My father was dead, murdered by these men. A low growl rumbled from Kaelin's chest, a sound of pure animal rage. He slowly, carefully set Lyra on her feet behind him, putting his body between her and the weapons. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low command meant only for me. "Take Lyra. Get to the door." "None of you are going anywhere," Ronan Thorn snarled, taking a step forward. "The king's head is worth a fortune. The princess is our insurance. And the healer, well, she knows too much now." It was a standoff with only one possible bloody end. I looked at the terrified children, at Lyra's brave, pale face, at Kaelin's broad back, ready to take a bolt for us all. My mind, usually so calm, raced. I had no weapons but my herbs and my wits. My herbs. My hand crept to my belt, to a different pouch, not a sleeping powder. This one held something rarer, more volatile, ghost cap spores. A hallucinogen so potent a pinch could send a man into a waking nightmare for hours. It was dangerous, unpredictable, but it was our only chance. I caught Kaelin's eye for a split second. I gave the slightest nod towards the lantern hanging above Vex and Thorn. Understanding flickered in his gaze. He was a king, a warrior. He knew how to seize an opening. "Your scheme ends tonight, Thorn," Kaelin said, drawing a deliberate step forward, drawing all their attention. "When my beta discovers your treachery, your pack will be scattered to the winds. Your name will be mud." "Your beta thinks you're dead," Thorn roared, the crossbow shifting minutely to track Kaelin's movement. "The Northern Vale is already dividing itself. By the time anyone pieces it together, I'll be sitting on your throne, with Vex's silver funding my reign." It was the distraction I needed. While Thorn was shouting, while Vex's smug attention was fixed on Kaelin, I ripped the pouch from my belt and threw it not at the men, but at the lantern above their heads. The leather struck the hot glass with a thwack. The pouch burst. A cloud of fine luminescent blue powder exploded into the air, directly in their faces. Vex screamed first, a short, sharp sound of surprise as the spores hit his eyes and nose. He stumbled back, clawing at his face. "What is this? I can't. I see them. The ghosts." Thorn, larger, inhaled a great lungful. He blinked. His eyes lost focus, staring at something only he could see. "No, the shadows! They're moving!" Chaos erupted. Vex fired his pistol blindly, the shot going wide and shattering a stall post. Thorn staggered, swinging the crossbow wildly, shouting at phantoms. "Now, go!" Kaelin roared. He didn't attack. He turned, swept Lyra into his arms again, and shoved me towards the main door. "The children! Ilara!" I herded the terrified kids ahead of me, like ducklings, as we burst out into the cold night air. Behind us, the stable echoed with the screams of two men lost in a botanical hell. We didn't stop. We ran for the tree line, the children stumbling, Kaelin carrying Lyra, me urging them on. We didn't stop running until the stable was a distant, silent blot behind us, until we reached the thicket where our horses were tied. The children collapsed, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Lyra clung to Kaelin, trembling. Kalen set her down and immediately turned to me. In the moonlight, his face was etched with a new kind of intensity. The ghost cap. That was brilliantly reckless. It was all I had, I panted, my own legs feeling like water. It was everything, he said. He reached out, his hand brushing a smear of the glowing blue powder from my cheek. The touch was brief, but it seared. He looked at the children, then back towards Blackwater. We can't go back to town. Vex and Thorn will send every thug they have after us. We need to get to safety, to my territory. How far? I asked, my healer's mind already calculating the state of the exhausted children. 5 days' hard ride to the nearest outpost of my guard. He looked at Lyra, at the silver cage pallor on her skin. We don't have 5 days. They'll be hunting us with trackers by morning. He made a decision, his jaw tightening. He pulled the silver ring from its cord again. He handed it to me. Take this, take Lyra. And the children. Head southeast. There's a village, Oakhaven. The blacksmith there, Gideon, is loyal to me. Show him the ring. He'll hide you. Get word to my beta, Rorin. My blood went cold. What are you going to do? I'm going to be the rabbit, he said, his eyes grim. I'll lead the hunt north, away from you. Draw them off. Give you time. No, that's suicide. You're still injured. It's the only way, he snapped, then instantly softened. Ilara, please, I have to protect my sister, and I have to protect you. This is how I do both. Lyra grabbed his arm. Don't leave, Kalen. Not again. He knelt before her, his hands on her shoulders. Lyra, listen to me. This is Ilara. She is our trusted friend. You must go with her. Be brave like you were in the cage. I will find you. I swear it on our parents' graves. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, commanding, loving all at once. Get her to safety, please. Tears blurred my vision. This was the choice. The mate bond howled inside me, a primal refusal to let him go. But the healer, the protector, knew he was right. The children and Lyra would never outrun professional trackers. I took the ring. It was warm from his skin. I clutched it tightly, nodding, unable to speak. He stood, his hand cupping my face for one heartbreaking second. Find Gideon. Tell him the mountain wolf howls for dawn. He will know. Then he turned, and without another word, he melted into the forest, heading north towards the mountains and the heart of the hunt. I was left holding the ring of a king, the hand of a princess, and the shattered pieces of a hope I'd just begun to build. The rescue had succeeded, but the cost was walking away from me into the dark. Come on, I said to Lyra, my voice hoarse but steady. I helped the children onto the 2 horses. Lyra climbed up behind me, her small arms wrapping around my waist. I kicked the horse and we moved southeast, away from the stable, away from the king, into a different kind of unknown. The ring burned a hole in my pocket, a symbol of a promise I would die to keep. The next 2 days were a blur of fear, cold, and relentless motion. We avoided roads, sticking to deer trails and rocky stream beds. I pushed the horses as hard as I dared, stopping only when the children were ready to drop from their saddles. Lyra was silent, a small, tense presence behind me, her face buried in my cloak. She ate when I told her to, drank when I offered water, but the spark I'd seen in the cage was banked, hidden beneath a layer of shock. I was running on healer's instinct and sheer stubbornness. Every snap of a twig was a pursuer. Every distant bird call was a signal. Kalen was out there, being the rabbit. Was he alive? Was he leading them on a wild chase, or was he already caught? The thought was a constant, gnawing pain in my chest, sharper than any physical wound. The mate bond, that strange new awareness, was a hollow, aching thing with him gone. It felt like a thread stretched to breaking, a silent cry in the dark. On the morning of the 3rd day, with the children hollow-eyed and the horses stumbling with fatigue, we crested a hill and saw Oakhaven nestled in the valley below. It was a modest village of timber and thatch, smoke curling peacefully from chimneys. It looked like safety. We descended, drawing stairs as our ragged group entered the main street. I headed for the only forge, its chimney belching black smoke into the gray sky. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal was a comforting, solid sound. A massive man with arms like tree trunks and a leather apron stood at the anvil. He looked up as we dismounted, his keen eyes taking in our disheveled state, the royal quality of Lyra's dirty dress, my healer's pack. He didn't speak. "Gideon?" I asked, my voice cracking from disuse. He gave a single, slow nod. My fingers were numb with cold as I fumbled in my pocket. I pulled out the silver ring and held it out on my palm. The hammering stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. Gideon's eyes went from the ring to my face, to Lyra's. He took the ring, his soot-blackened fingers surprisingly gentle. He examined the crest, the mountain wolf. Then he looked at me, his gaze piercing. "Who howls for it?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble. "The mountain wolf," I whispered the code, the strength leaving my legs now that we'd arrived. "He howls for dawn." Something shifted in the blacksmith's stern face. A flood of emotion, relief, grief, determination passed through his eyes. He closed his massive hand around the ring and dropped to one knee before Lyra, bowing his head. "My princess," he said, his voice thick, "the sun has been dark without you." Lyra took a small step forward. She placed a hand on his bowed head, a gesture of shocking grace and authority from one so young. "Rise, Gideon. My brother sent us. He needs your help." Gideon rose, his eyes now sweeping over the other children. "And you brought lambs from the wolf's den. Come, all of you. You're safe now." He ushered us into the back of the forge, through a door hidden behind a stack of iron ingots, and down a set of stone steps into a cool, dry root cellar. It was clean, stocked with food, water, and pallets of straw, a hidden, safe house. While the children fell upon the food with desperate gratitude, Gideon pulled me aside. "Tell me everything." I told him. The auction, the poisoning, the names Vex and Thorn, the rescue, the ghost cap, Kalen's sacrifice to lead the hunt away. When I finished, Gideon's face was like granite. "Thorn," he growled. "We suspected a leak. Betrayal from within the border packs. This confirms it. And Vex, his silver has been poisoning our politics for years. You look at me with newfound respect. You have the heart of a warrior healer and the mind of a strategist. The king chose well." "He didn't choose," I said. The exhaustion and worry made me blunt. "The moon chose. He told me of the bond." Gideon went very still. He looked from me to where Lyra was carefully sharing her bread with the smallest child. "The bond," he repeated, awe in his voice. "With a human healer. The legends, they speak of such a thing in times of great upheaval, a bond that bridges worlds to restore balance." He bowed his head to me, a second, deeper gesture of respect. "My lady, then our hope is doubly sure. The king lives. I can feel it in the pack sense, faint, but there. And now he has his true anchor." His words should have comforted me, but they only made the ache worse. "We have to help him. He's alone." "He is not alone," Gideon said firmly. "You have him, and now he has me." He moved to a corner of the cellar, shifted a crate, and revealed a small, recessed space. From it, he drew a polished horn, banded in silver, a war horn. "This king bought you time. Now we use it. This horn will call the loyal ones, the ones who never believed he was dead. We will muster here, and when we're strong enough, we will not wait for the hunt to find him. We will bring the dawn to the mountains ourselves." Hope, frail but tenacious, sparked again in my chest. We weren't just hiding, we were preparing. For the next week, Oakhaven became a secret fortress. Gideon sent out quiet, trusted runners. Men and women began to arrive, not soldiers in uniform, but farmers with grim faces, woodsmen with sharp axes, a few hard-eyed warriors in worn leathers. They came in ones and twos by night. They saw Lyra, and they heard the story, and they knelt. The princess was their proof. The ring was their symbol. I tended to the children, helping them heal from their ordeal. Lyra stayed by my side, a silent shadow slowly coming back to life. She began to help me with the younger ones, showing a gentle, innate leadership. She was her brother's sister, through and through. One evening, as I prepared more poultices, Lyra sat beside me, sorting herbs. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "You know he loves you." My hand stilled. "Lyra." "I could feel it," she said softly, her small fingers tracing the shape of a leaf. There was this new warmth in him, a calm spot in the storm. "It was you." Tears filled my eyes. "He's your brother. His first love is for you." "It's a big heart," she said with wisdom far beyond her years. "There's room for both." She finally looked at me, her blue eyes earnest. "You'll help him be a good king, not just a strong one. My mother used to say that was the difference." Her simple faith was a balm. The bond inside me, that stretched, aching thread, gave a sudden, strong pulse. It wasn't pain. It was a surge of fierce, determined life. A signal. I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. "What is it?" Lyra asked, alarmed. "I think he's alive," I breathed, a smile breaking through my worry for the first time in days. The thread was no longer stretched thin. It was thrumming, a steady drumbeat of defiance and survival. Kaelin was out there, and he was coming home. Gideon entered the cellar, his expression grim but excited. "The scouts have returned. The king is leading Thorn's trackers for a merry dance through the high crags. He's wounded a few, evaded the rest. He's heading this way, drawing them into the valley." He looked at the gathering of 50 loyal wolves and humans in the cellar, at the stacks of weapons he'd been forging day and night. "It's time. Tomorrow, we finish this. We turn the hunt into an ambush. We bring our king home." The quiet preparation was over. The hidden war was about to become a battle. And I, Ilara, the healer, was no longer just a guide or a refuge. I was the anchor. I was the mate of a king returning to claim his crown. And I was ready to fight for him. The valley south of Oakhaven was called the Silent Dale. It was a perfect bowl of land, its sides steep and wooded, its floor a flat meadow bisected by a shallow, rocky stream. It was a perfect killing ground. Under Gideon's direction, our small force melted into the trees along the eastern ridge. We were not an army. We were farmers, woodsmen, a few retired soldiers, and me, a healer with a bag of medicines and a heart pounding like a war drum. But we had surprise, and we had righteousness. Lyra and the rescued children were safe in a cave high on the ridge with 2 stern-looking wolf guards. My place was with Gideon at the center of the line, a healer station set up behind a thick fallen log. The wait was agony. The morning was cold and still, the only sound the gurgle of the stream below. The bond inside me was a live wire, pulling taut, drawing me towards the northern pass. He was close. Then we heard it, a howl. Not the long, mournful cry of a lone wolf, but a sharp, defiant series of barks and yips, a signal, a taunt. Kaelin. Moments later, he burst from the tree line at the north end of the valley. He was a nightmare vision of survival. His clothes were torn to rags, crudely bandaged wounds visible on his arms and leg. He was limping, favoring his right side, but he was moving with desperate, determined speed. He carried a rough spear, its tip darkened with old blood. Behind him, spilling from the trees like a pack of hounds, came his pursuers, 12 of them, armed with bows, swords, and nets. At their head, his face a mask of fury, was Ronan Thorn. He'd lost his fine cloak. He looked wild, unhinged, a predator who'd been denied his kill for too long. "There's no river to cross here, Princeling," Ronan roared across the distance. "Nowhere left to run." Kaelin didn't answer. He ran for the center of the meadow, putting the stream between himself and his hunters. He stopped, turned, and planted his spear in the ground. He stood there, chest heaving, a solitary figure against the green. He wasn't running anymore. Thorn and his men fanned out, approaching cautiously, sensing a trap but seeing only one wounded man. Going to make your last stand? How poetic." Kalen lifted his head. He didn't look at Thorn. He looked up, towards the ridge where we were hidden, and he smiled, a fierce, triumphant, terrifying smile. Then he drew a deep breath, and he howled. It was not a sound of pain or fear. It was a call, a king's summons. It shattered the silence of the dale, echoing off the stone walls, a raw, powerful promise of vengeance and return. On that signal, Gideon stood and blew the war horn. The sound was deep, brazen, and final. Our forces rose as one from the tree line, not with a scream, but with a low, unified growl that was somehow more frightening. Arrows flew first, not aimed to kill, but to harass, to drive Thorn's men into confusion. They clumped together, shields raised, their confident advance broken. "Ambush!" someone yelled. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. Thorn's men were trackers and bullies, not soldiers. Faced with a coordinated attack from a higher ground, their discipline broke. Gideon led a charge down the slope, a massive hammer in his hands, swinging with devastating force. Our farmers fought with the ferocity of those defending their homes and their rightful king. I stayed at my log, my eyes locked on Kalen. As the chaos erupted around him, he moved. He pulled his spear from the ground and went straight for Ronan Thorn. Thorn saw him coming and shifted. His clothes tore as a massive, brindled brown wolf erupted forth, fangs bared, charging to meet the man who threatened everything. Kalen didn't shift. He couldn't. He was too wounded, too drained. He faced the monstrous wolf as a man with a wooden spear. It should have been a slaughter, but Kalen was fury incarnate. He dodged the first lunge, driving the spear into Thorn's shoulder. The wolf howled in pain, wrenching away. They circled, Thorn snapping, Kalen parrying with the spear, each movement costing him dearly. Blood soaked through his bandages. My heart was in my throat. I saw an opening, a moment when Thorn reared up to slash down with his claws. Kalen was too slow to bring the spear around. I didn't think. I acted. I snapped up a heavy river stone from the stream bank. I wasn't a warrior. My throw wouldn't kill, but I was a healer. I knew anatomy. I hurled the stone with all my strength, not at Thorn's head, but at his hind leg, at the joint. The stone struck true with a sickening crack. Thorn yelped, his leg buckling, his deadly swipe going wide. It was the distraction Kalen needed. As Thorn stumbled, Kalen's wrapped the spear. With a final explosive burst of strength, he leapt onto the wolf's back, his arms wrapping around the thick neck. He didn't have fangs. He had his hands and a will of iron. He held on, applying pressure to the great artery, ignoring the claws that raked his sides. The world narrowed to that struggle in the center of the meadow. The fighting around them seemed to pause, watching. The great brown wolf thrashed, trying to dislodge him, but Kalen held on like a burr, his face a mask of grim endurance. Slowly, the thrashing weakened. The wolf's snarls became wheezes. Its legs gave out. It collapsed to the ground, and Kalen rolled off, landing on his back in the grass, gasping for air. The brindled wolf shimmered, shrinking back into the form of Ronan Thorn. He lay on his back, eyes wide, clutching his throat, drawing ragged breaths futile. He looked at Kalen, who was struggling to sit up, covered in blood and dirt. "The throne," Thorn rasped. "It should have been mine." A throne built on kidnapped children and betrayal is no throne. It's a grave, and you have dug yours. Ronan Thorn's eyes glazed over. He took one last shuddering breath and was still. Silence fell over the dale. Thorn's remaining men, seeing their leader dead, dropped their weapons, falling to their knees in surrender. It was over. I was running before I knew it, scrambling down the slope, my healer's bag bouncing against my hip. I skidded to my knees in the grass beside Kalen. He was a mess. New claw marks scored his chest and sides, layered over old, half-healed wounds. But his eyes were open, clear, and fixed on me. "Alara," he breathed, a smile touching his bloodied lips. "Your aim is improving." Tears streamed down my face as I began to assess the damage, my hands already pulling out bandages and cleansing herbs. "You idiot! You glorious, reckless, impossible idiot!" He caught my wrist, his grip weak but sure. "The bond," he whispered. "It led me back. It was the only compass I needed." I finished cleaning a deep gash, my hands trembling. "Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever leave." "Never," he vowed, his eyes holding a promise that went beyond the battlefield, beyond the crown. "If you'll have me." I leaned my forehead against his, ignoring the blood, the sweat, the chaos around us. In that quiet space between breaths, with the scent of pine and victory in the air, I gave my answer not with words, but with the steady beat of my heart against his, and the silent, unconditional acceptance that flowed down the bond between us. The king had returned. The traitor was dead, and the healer had found her place, not in his shadow, but firmly, irrevocably at his side. Victory in the Silent Dale was a beginning, not an end. The immediate danger was gone, but a kingdom had been left leaderless, its borders vulnerable, its people whispering of a dead king.
Kaelin could barely stand. My healer's heart demanded weeks of rest, but the king's mind was already racing ahead. Ronan Thorn was dead, but his betrayal was a cancer that had spread. We had to cauterize it, and fast. Gideon took charge of the prisoners and sent swift riders ahead to Stonekeep, the capital of the Northern Vale, carrying the news. The king lived, the traitor was slain, the princess was safe, and the king was returning. Our journey to Stonekeep was a slow, painful procession, but it felt like a coronation march. News traveled faster than we did. In every village we passed, people lined the muddy streets. They didn't cheer. The shock was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. They watched in silent, profound awe as their king, wounded but unbowed, rode at the head of a column of loyalists. And they saw the young princess, Lyra, riding beside him, her head held high. And they saw me, the unknown healer, always at his right hand, my presence a new puzzle in their old stories. Kaelin Vex, the silver merchant, had vanished. Gideon's scouts reported his base of operations emptied, his assets frozen or gone. The snake had retreated to its hole, but we all knew he was still out there, his wealth and his malice intact. Stonekeep rose before us on the 5th day. It was not a castle of delicate spires, but a fortress hewn from the mountain itself, gray and imposing, banners snapping in the wind. The great gates stood open. Arrayed before them was the entire court, or what remained of it. Counselors in fine robes, warriors in polished armor, all standing in rigid, anxious lines. At their front stood a man I knew instantly from Kaelin's descriptions, Roran, his beta. He was tall, with dark hair shot with silver, and a face that was all sharp angles and watchful intelligence. His eyes found Kaelin, and for a moment the stern mask slipped, revealing a wave of emotion so powerful it was palpable: relief, guilt, fierce joy. As we drew to a halt, Roran strode forward and dropped to one knee in the dirt, bowing his head. "My king, my heart has been in shadow. Welcome home." The court followed suit, a ripple of knees hitting stone, heads bowing. Kaelin dismounted stiffly, refusing help. He walked to Roran and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rise, my friend. The shadow was not of your making. You held the line. For that you have my eternal gratitude." Roran stood, his eyes sweeping over Kaelin's battered state, then to Lyra, who slid from her horse and ran to hug him fiercely. Finally, his gaze landed on me, curious, assessing. "This is Ilara," Kaelin said, his voice carrying to the silent court. "She pulled me from death's grasp with her skill. She stood against Thorn's wolves with more courage than any warrior I know. She saved your princess, and she saved me. She is under the protection of the crown, and her word in my halls is to be respected as my own."
It was a staggering declaration. A murmur ran through the court. I saw curious glances, calculating stares, a few frowns of disapproval. A human healer given such status? Roran, however, simply bowed his head to me. Lady Ilara, the debt of the Northern Vale is to you. The formalities continued, a blur of names and titles. We were ushered into Stonekeep. The interior was as formidable as the outside. Vast stone halls, huge fireplaces, tapestries depicting wolves and mountains. It was powerful, beautiful, and utterly freezing. Kaelin was immediately swept away to the healer's wing, staffed by palace physicians who looked at my simple herbs with polite skepticism. I insisted on being present. An argument ensued, quiet but tense, until Kaelin's voice, weak but absolute, cut through it. Ilara stays. She is my healer. Lyra was taken by a flock of anxious handmaidens to be bathed, fed, and reassured. I was shown to a set of rooms near the quarters. They were enormous, with a fireplace larger than my old cottage, a bed draped in furs, and a window that looked out over the entire mist-shrouded valley. It felt like a cage made of silk. A servant brought me a bath and fresh clothes, a simple, well-made dress of deep green wool, nothing courtly. As I washed the grime away from the road, the reality of it all crashed down. I was in a king's fortress. I was bonded to a king, and a court of wolves was watching my every move. A soft knock came at the door. It was Roran. "May I enter, Lady Ilara?" "Please, and just Ilara is fine." He stepped in, closing the door. He studied me for a moment. He told me about the bond. I nodded, unsure what to say. "It explains much," Roran said, his voice thoughtful. "His strength in the Dale, the clarity of his purpose since he returned. The bond is a powerful magic. It will make him stronger, but it will also make him a target, and you by extension." "I'm used to being a target," I said quietly. "Not like this." Roran's expression was grave. "Thorn is dead, but his faction remains. Those who profited from the chaos, who hoped to gain from a child queen or a broken throne, they will see you as a weakness to exploit or a threat to eliminate. And Kaelin Vex is still out there. A man with that much silver can buy many knives in the dark." What do I do? The question was honest, stripped of pride. Be exactly what you are. Be strong, be clever, heal, and stand by his side. The court will test you. They will try to make you stumble. Do not give them the satisfaction. The king's claim on you is ancient and powerful, but your place here, you will have to earn it yourself. It was not a threat, but a warning, a roadmap for a war I didn't know I'd enlisted in. "Thank you, Roran." He gave a short bow. "We are pack now, Ilara. In saving him, you saved us all. Welcome to Stonekeep." He left, and I was alone again in the giant room. I walked to the window, looking out at the kingdom I had somehow become a part of. It was vast, wild, and dangerous, but somewhere in this cold stone mountain, my wounded king was sleeping, and the thread between us hummed with a steady, reassuring warmth. The fight for the crown was over. The fight for the court was just beginning. Life in Stonekeep settled into a strange, tense rhythm. Kaelin was recovering with a wolf's rapid healing, but he was buried under a mountain of work. Reports from the borders, the dismantling of Thorn's network, the re-establishment of trust. I saw her at meals and in the evenings, but our time was always flanked by counselors or petitioners. The court was a beast of its own. I attended gatherings in the great hall, a silent observer at Kaelin's insistence. I wore my simple dresses amidst a sea of silks and jewels. The women of the court were polite, their smiles never reaching their eyes. Their questions were sharp needles wrapped in velvet. "And where did you say your family hailed from, dear?" "A healer. How practical. But surely now you'll have people for that sort of thing. The bond must be so overwhelming for a human. Are you sure you're quite well?" I answered with calm brevity, my healer's demeanor my best armor. I spent my days not in idle gossip, but in the palace infirmary, working alongside the suspicious physicians. I didn't try to impose my ways. I watched, I learned their methods, and when a guardsman came in with a festering wound their poultices couldn't touch, I quietly offered a paste of honey and yarrow. The infection broke by morning. Slowly, grudgingly, the head physician, an old wolf named Alaric, began to ask for my opinion. Lyra was my sanctuary. We would walk in the walled garden, and she would tell me stories of her parents, of a time before the shadows. She was healing too, the nightmares fading. She called me Alara in public, but in private it had become Lara, a sister's shorthand. Kaylin and I had no private moments. The bond was a constant, warm presence in my chest, a connection that deepened every day, but it was unspoken. There was too much to do, too many eyes watching. Yet sometimes, across a crowded hall, our eyes would meet. No smile, just a steady, unwavering look that held a universe of understanding. It was enough, for now. The first real test came a week after our return. A formal council was called to address the Thorn matter. I was given a seat at the high table, beside Kaylin. Lyra sat on his other side. The hall was packed with the high-ranking members of the pack, alphas from allied territories, wealthy landowners, military commanders. The air thrummed with tension. Kaylin laid out the evidence, Thorn's correspondence with Vex, the testimony of the rescued children, the records of missing persons that spiked along his border. He spoke with a cold, relentless logic that brooked no argument. When he finished, an older alpha, a grizzled man named Boren from the Eastern Holds, stood. "My king, the evidence is damning. Thorn's guilt is plain. But this human testimony," his eyes flicked to me, dismissive, "and the word of traumatized pups, is it enough to justify the unrest your actions have caused? You left the throne unattended. You provoked a conflict that could have drawn in our neighbors." It was an accusation disguised as concern. A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the council. Kaylin's expression didn't change, but I felt a surge of cold anger through the bond. Before he could speak, another voice cut in. "Is the life of our princess not justification enough?" All heads turned. Lyra had stood up. She was small beside her brother, but she drew herself to her full height, her blue eyes blazing. "I was the traumatized pup in a silver cage, Alpha Boren. I heard the plans. I saw the lists of names. My brother did not provoke a conflict. He ended one that a traitor had already begun. Would you have preferred he stayed on his throne and negotiated for my pieces as they were mailed to him?" The hall went dead silent. A 12-year-old girl had just eviscerated a seasoned warrior with words alone. Boren's face flushed dark red, but he could not rebut the princess. Kaylin put a hand on Lyra's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. "My sister speaks truth. The conflict existed. I chose to meet it head-on rather than let it fester and poison us from within. The throne is not a chair to be warmed. It is a duty to be active. I was active." Then he turned his gaze on the entire council, his alpha power radiating gently but unmistakably, a reminder of who held authority. "The matter of Thorn is closed. His lands are forfeit to the crown. His accomplices will be rooted out. Our next concern is Kaylin Vex. His silver is a weapon. We must find him, and we must sever his influence." The discussion moved on, but the dynamic had shifted. Lyra had shown her steel, and I had seen the cracks in the court's unity. After the council, as we walked back to the private quarters, Kaylin fell into step beside me. "You were quiet today." I replied, "Lyra said everything that needed saying." "She did, but you saw it, didn't you? The factions, the fear of change? Boren is afraid of you, not of Thorn or Vex. He's afraid of a king who acts without asking permission from the old guard first." Kaylin looked at me, surprised and impressed. "Exactly. You read them well." "I'm a healer. Reading subtle signs of sickness is my job. Boren's sickness is irrelevance, and he knows the medicine you bring might cure the kingdom, but kill his status." He stopped, turning to face me in the empty corridor. The bond between us surged, a physical pull. I need you in these councils, Alara, not as a silent partner, as my eyes. My instincts are for battle and strategy. Yours for people, for truth. I need that balance. They won't like it. I don't require them to like it. I require them to obey their king, and their king requires you. It was as close to a declaration as we could afford in the echoing stone hallway. He didn't touch me, but the look in his eyes was a caress, a promise of a future where corridors would not stand between us. Then I'll be your eyes, I whispered. The next test was more direct. 2 days later, I received a summons, not from Kaelin, but from Lady Isabel, Voren's daughter and one of the most influential women at court. It was for an afternoon tea in her lavish chambers. It was a trap, beautifully laid. I knew it. Roran knew it. Kaelin wanted to forbid it. I cannot shield me from every drawing room, I told him. If I am to be your balance, I must learn to navigate their waters. Reluctantly, he agreed. Lady Isabel's rooms were a cloud of perfumed silk and tinkling laughter. 5 other ladies were there, all watching me with the keen interest of cats at a mouse hole. The conversation was a masterclass in subtle cruelty. They discussed a recent trade deal, using terms I didn't know. They gossiped about families and bloodlines I'd never heard of. They painted a picture of a world I could never belong to, each brushstroke meant to highlight my ignorance. I sat, sipped my tea, and said nothing. I listened. I learned. Then Isabel turned her sweet smile on me. My dear Alara, it must be so dull for you listening to our prattle. We should talk of things you understand. Herbs, perhaps. Do tell us what is good for a common headache. It was the opening, the dismissal. I set my cup down with a soft click. For a common headache, willow bark is effective, I said, my voice calm. But the headaches in this room seem less common. They stem from tension, from tightness in the neck and shoulders brought on by prolonged sitting and scheming. I let my gaze sweep the room. For that, I'd recommend a tincture of lavender and chamomile, and perhaps a long, honest walk in fresh air. It does wonders for clearing bad humors.
The tinkling laughter died. The ladies stared, their masks of pleasantry slipping to reveal shock. I had not cowered. I had not stumbled. I had diagnosed their hypocrisy to their faces, wrapped in a healer's advice. Isabel's smile turned brittle. How inventive. I stood. Thank you for the tea, Lady Isabel. It was most illuminating. If you'll excuse me, the king has asked me to review the infirmary reports. Real work, you understand. I left the room, my head high, the bond in my chest singing with a fierce protective pride that I knew was Kaelin's. I had faced the court's shadows in their own den, and I had not blinked. The war for the court was not won in a day, but that afternoon I had claimed my first victory. I was not just the healer who saved the king. I was Alara, who could stand in a silken trap and walk out unscathed, and the court was beginning to understand that the king's human mate might be the most formidable player of all. The search for Kaelin Vex was like chasing smoke. His warehouses were empty, his accounts routed through a dozen false fronts. The silver had gone to ground, but the damage it had funded was everywhere. In the lingering fear in border villages, in the empty places at family tables, in suspicious glances between pack alphas who wondered who else Thorn might have corrupted. A moon cycle after our return to Stonekeep, a breakthrough came, not from our scouts, but from an unexpected source. A trader from the southern deserts, a human with no love for wolf politics, arrived at the gates. He demanded an audience with the healer who used Ghost Cap. Intrigued, Kaelin granted it, with Roran and me present. The trader, a wiry man named Jarek, bowed to no one. He looked at me with sharp black eyes. You cost me a shipment of spices. Your little powder storm in that stable scared the caravans off the North Road for a week. My apologies for the inconvenience, I said dryly.
The children we rescued were grateful. A grudging smile touched his lips. Point taken. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for trade. Information for, let's call it, future consideration. What information? Kalen's voice was cool. Your silver snake, Vex. He's not hiding. He's rebuilding. Bigger. He's bought himself a new partner, or rather a patron. Who? Roran demanded. A man who doesn't like kings. A man who believes wolf territories are for the taking. He's from across the Eastern Sea. They call him Silas. Silas the shiplord. He has an army of mercenaries and a fleet. Vex is his key to the mainland. His silver is buying Silas safe harbors, loyalties, and silence. The air in the room turned to ice. A foreign invader paired with a traitor's knowledge of our weaknesses. It was a threat an order of magnitude greater than Thorn. Where? Kalen asked, a single word laden with deadly intent. Vex is marshaling his remaining forces in Silas's advance guard at the old coastal fort, Hawk's Perch. It's a ruin, but defensible. They're using the sea caves to bring in men and weapons. They plan to secure the fort, then use it as a dagger pointed at the heart of your veil. They move in 3 days' time to fully occupy it. The strategy was chillingly smart. Hawk's Perch was on a sheer cliff, almost impregnable from land, with secret access from the sea. If they held it, they could raid the coast at will, a constant, draining threat. Jarek left with a promise of open trade routes in the future. The moment he was gone, Kalen was on his feet, calling for maps. We must strike before they're entrenched, Roran said, his finger stabbing the map at Hawk's Perch. The path is a goat track, easily defended. Then we don't assault from the land, Kalen said, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. He looked at me. The sea caves. Jarek said they're using them. Can we use them too? A plan formed, audacious and desperate. We would not march an army. We would take a small elite force, Kalen, Roran, Gideon, a dozen of the best warriors, and a healer. We would sail under cover of darkness to the base of the cliffs, navigate the treacherous sea caves at low tide, and emerge inside the fort itself. A surgical strike to cut off the head of the serpent before the body could coil. It's madness, Roran stated. The tides, the caves, one wrong turn and we drown in the dark. Staying here is slower madness, Kalen countered. Letting them dig in at Hawk's Perch is a death sentence for our coastal packs. This is our only chance. I knew my role. I would go. Not as a warrior, but as the only one who could identify Vex on sight, and as the healer who might be needed if the madness worked. Lyra begged to come. Kalen was adamant. You are the heir. You must stay here, with Alaric and a full guard. If we fail, you are the hope of the kingdom. He knelt before her. Rule well, little star. 2 nights later, we were on a sleek, dark fishing boat, rocking on the swells beneath the brooding shadow of Hawk's Perch. The cliffs loomed above us, black against a starless sky. The only sound was the crash of waves against rock and the creak of the boat. The sea caves were a whispering, dripping labyrinth of darkness. We moved in single file, guided by a single hooded lantern through tunnels that sometimes narrowed to a squeeze. The air was cold and salty, the floor slick with seaweed. The bond between Kalen and me was a taut line of shared focus and silent communication. After what felt like an eternity, we saw a glimmer of torchlight ahead. The cave opened into a large natural cavern that had been turned into a dock. Several small boats were tied up. A rough stairway carved into the rock led upward, and there were guards. The fight in the cavern was swift and silent, knives and strength against surprised men. We left them bound and gagged in the shadows. We climbed the stairs, emerging into the lower courtyard of the fort. It was a scene of organized chaos. Crates were being unpacked, mercenaries in foreign armor lounged, and in the center of it all, directing men with a ledger in his hand, was Kalen Vex. He looked older, harder, his elegance replaced with a ruthless efficiency. He hadn't seen us yet. We were shadows among shadows. "The plan," Kalen whispered. "Roran, Gideon, secure the gate mechanism, lower the portcullis, trap them inside. The rest with me. We take Vex, alive if possible." They melted away. Kalen looked at me. "Stay behind me. Your job is to find Silas if he's here. Identify him."
We moved forward, sticking to the walls. We were almost to Vex when a mercenary turning from a crate spotted us. His shout of alarm shattered the night. Chaos erupted. Vex spun, his eyes widening in recognition and hatred. He didn't run. He drew an elegant, thin sword. "Kalen, you are a cockroach that will not die." Kalen drew his own blade, motioning me back into an alcove. "It's over, Vex. Your partner's fleet is being met by my navy as we speak. You have nowhere to run." It was a bluff, but a good one. Vex's confidence faltered for a second. That was all Kalen needed. He attacked. Their blades met with a shriek of steel. Vex was no warrior, but he was desperate and well-trained. They dueled across the cobblestones, a dance of death under the torches. Around them, the larger battle raged as our men clashed with Vex's guards and Silas's mercenaries. I scanned the fray, looking for Silas. I saw a man on the ramparts, tall, with long gray hair, barking orders in a foreign tongue. The shiplord. He was pointing towards the sea, where pinpricks of light were indeed appearing. Kalen's navy, responding to our signal flare. The bluff had become truth. My moment of triumph was cut short. A burly mercenary, seeing me unarmed in the alcove, lunged for me. I ducked, throwing a handful of blinding powder from my belt. He roared, clawing at his eyes. I tried to dart past him, but his wild swing caught me on the side of the head. The world exploded in stars and pain. I stumbled, falling to my knees. Through blurred vision, I saw Kalen. He saw me fall. A roar of pure rage tore from his throat. He disengaged from Vex with a brutal, unstoppable force, knocking the man's sword aside and driving his own through Vex's shoulder, pinning him to a wooden post. Then Kalen turned towards the mercenary advancing on me. He didn't bother with his sword. He shifted. The transformation in the courtyard was not the tortured, poisoned struggle in my cottage. It was a release. A king reclaiming his birthright. Clothes shredded as a wolf of immense size and power erupted where the man had been. His fur was the color of a storm cloud, his eyes blazing suns of gold. He was magnificent and terrible. He landed between me and the mercenary with a snarl that shook the stones. The man froze, his courage evaporating. With a single swipe of a paw the size of a platter, Kalen sent him flying across the courtyard, where he lay still. The wolf turned to me. The golden eyes were not wild, but deeply, intelligently concerned. He nudged me gently with his massive head, a whine in his throat. "I'm all right," I gasped, touching his fur. It was softer than it looked. "Finish it." He gave my face one more careful lick, then turned. The fight was leaving the enemy. The portcullis was down, trapping them. Silas, seeing his plans collapsing, was fighting a retreat towards the sea caves. Kalen the wolf bounded after him, a gray streak of vengeance. I struggled to my feet, leaning against the wall, watching as my king hunted down the last threat to his kingdom. In the end, Silas chose the sea over the wolf. Cornered on a jagged outcrop over the crashing waves, with Kalen advancing, the shiplord turned and leapt into the black water below, disappearing into the foam. The battle for Hawk's Perch was over. We had won. Vex was captured, his network broken. Silas was routed, his invasion stillborn. As dawn painted the sky in streaks of pink and gold, Kalen shifted back. Naked, streaked with blood and soot, he walked to me through the quieting courtyard. He didn't care who saw. He took my face in his hands, his eyes searching mine. "You're hurt."
It's nothing. You were incredible." He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, his body trembling with fading adrenaline and overwhelming relief. The bond between us sang, a harmonious chord of victory, protection, and a love that had been tested in fire and sea spray and found unbreakable. On the cliffs of Hawk's Perch, with the rising sun at our backs and a saved kingdom at our feet, the king and the healer finally stood together, not as partners in a pact, but as two halves of a single, unstoppable whole. The shadows were banished. The dawn, at long last, had truly come. The victory at Hawk's Perch did not just win a battle, it forged a legend. The tale of the king who became a wolf to defend his human mate, who scaled sheer cliffs and cleansed a traitor's nest, spread through the northern vale like wildfire. Calen Vex, broken and silverless, sang a detailed song of his crimes in the throne room before being taken to a deep, dark cell. The shadow of his conspiracy was lifted. In the weeks that followed, Stonekeep transformed. The cautious politeness thawed into genuine, if sometimes odd, respect. The court had seen their king's ferocity and his heart. They had seen the princess's courage, and they had seen me, the healer, standing firm in the storm, my worth proven not by birth, but by action. 1 month to the day after our return from the coast, the great hall of Stonekeep was not set for a council, but for a celebration. Garlands of evergreen and winter berries hung from the beams. A huge fire roared in the hearth. The entire pack was there, from the highest alpha to the lowliest kitchen maid. The air buzzed with a joyous, expectant energy. Lyra, resplendent in a blue velvet dress, her hair braided with silver threads, sat on a smaller throne beside the great one. She grinned at me, giving a tiny, excited wave. I stood at the front, not dressed in silk, but in a gown of deep forest green, embroidered at the hem with patterns of healing herbs, my mother's designs, stitched by the palace seamstresses under my direction. It was my heritage, my power, woven into the fabric of this new world. Calen entered last. He wore the royal colors, gray and silver, but no crown. His gaze found me immediately, and the bond between us, now a constant, warm, and comforting presence, flared with such profound love and pride it took my breath away. He walked to the dais, but did not sit. He turned to face the assembly, and silence fell. "My people," his voice rang out, clear and strong. "For too long the Vale has lived under shadows of betrayal, of fear, of division. Those shadows are gone, swept away by your loyalty, by your courage, and by the light of truth." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "A kingdom is not just land and laws, it is its people, and it is strengthened by the bonds between them. The strongest bond of all is one of trust, of partnership, of love that chooses the good of the pack above all else." He stepped down from the dais and walked towards me. The crowd parted like a sea. My heart hammered against my ribs. He stopped before me, taking both my hands in his. He didn't kneel. He stood as my equal, his winter blue eyes holding mine, letting the entire kingdom see the truth in them. "Alara, you bought a dying man for a coin, and in doing so, you gave a king back his life. You walked into darkness for a stranger's sister, and you gave a princess back her family. You faced down the court's scorn with grace, and you gave a kingdom back its heart. You are my healer, my strategist, my courage, and my compass." He lifted one hand to cup my cheek. The moon saw fit to bind our souls. Today, before our pack, I ask you to bind our lives. Will you stand beside me, not just as my mate, but as my queen? Will you help me rule this vale with compassion as well as strength, with wisdom as well as power? Will you be my Luna? The hall was utterly silent. This was not a demand, it was a question, an offering, the final public acceptance of the bond and all it meant. Tears of pure joy streamed down my face. I saw my father's proud smile in my memory, my mother's gentle nod. I saw Lyra bouncing on her toes and Roran's solemn, approving nod. I saw Gideon's broad grin. I looked into the eyes of the king, the wolf, the man I loved, the ghost I had bought, who had turned out to be my destiny. Yes, I said, my voice clear and sure, carrying to the very back of the hall. 1,000 times yes. A roar of approval shook the stone walls. It was not a polite applause, but a full-throated, pack-wide howl of celebration that rose to the rafters. Kalen's smile was the sun breaking through winter clouds. He turned, raising our joined hands. People of the Northern Vale, I give you your Luna, Queen Alara. The cheer redoubled. Then, from a velvet cushion carried by Roran, Kalen took not one, but 2 crowns. The first was his own, the ancient circlet of silver and obsidian, the mountain wolf. He placed it upon his own head. The weight and duty finally settled where it belonged. The second crown was new. It was lighter, made of intertwined silver branches, and nestled among them, crafted from gold and green enamel, were delicate, perfect replicas of healing herbs, valerian, dandelion, willow, gentian, a crown of light and herb. With infinite tenderness, he placed it upon my head. It fitted perfectly, not a burden, but a natural extension of myself. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, our crowns touching. "My king," he whispered, for my ears alone. "My king," I whispered back. The celebration that followed lasted into the small hours. There was music, dancing, feasting. I danced with Kalen, a formal, graceful dance that felt like flying. I danced with a beaming Gideon and with a surprisingly graceful Roran. I even danced with a delighted Lyra, who declared it the best day ever. Later, as the stars wheeled overhead, we stood together on the high balcony, looking out over our sleeping kingdom. The Vale was peaceful, its borders secure, its people safe. The bond between us was a quiet, steady hum of complete contentment. Kalen's arm was around my shoulders, mine around his. "It began with a coin," I said softly. "And ended with a crown," he replied, pressing a kiss to my temple. "But this is not an ending, my love. This is our beginning." I looked up at him, my king, my mate, my heart. The lonely healer from the forest's edge was gone. In her place stood a queen, crowned in herbs and silver, bound to a wolf and ready to help write the next chapter of the legend. Together, we turned our faces towards the future, no longer a king and a healer from different worlds, but one pack, one heart, one rule, forged in sacrifice, sealed by destiny, and shining brighter than any silver under the light of the moon. The end.